It is impossible to just sit and shape your reality by mere contemplation.
Although there are people who can literally carry out the materialization of objects out of thin air.
But there are very few such people, and they do not advertise their abilities. And yet, thoughts have the same strong influence on the fate of a person, as well as his concrete actions. People are accustomed to the fact that actions entail visible and easily explainable consequences. The influence of thoughts manifests itself imperceptibly, and therefore is inexplicable and unpredictable. It may seem difficult to establish a visual causal relationship between thoughts and subsequent events.
But soon you will be convinced that a person's thoughts shape reality in a completely direct way.
A person gets what he chooses. Someone may object, it turns out that these seas, mountains, planets, galaxies, everything is a product of my mental radiation. It is sometimes common for man to consider himself the center of the universe. In fact, it only occupies a tiny niche in this world. Our world is inhabited by many living organisms, and each contributes to the formation of reality. Each creature has its own parameters of mental radiation. If you are uncomfortable with considering the radiation of a plant as mental, call it differently, the essence does not change. It is not even possible to assert with certainty that inanimate objects have nothing like the radiation of living organisms. Not to mention the one spirit that pervades all that exists, and which we call God. Each creature has its own consciousness and forms a layer of its own world. We can say that everything in this world carries a particle of God, and thus He rules the whole world.
Each person follows his own line of life.
And at the same time, all people live in the same world. The material world is the same for everyone, but the specific realization for each person is different. Let's say you are a tourist and you are walking through a beautiful city. You admire the sights, admire the beauty of architecture, see flower beds, fountains, park alleys, smiling faces of prosperous citizens. In the place where you pass, a homeless man stopped near the urn. He, just like you, is in the same world, and not in another dimension. And yet, he sees not at all what you do. He sees an empty bottle in an urn, sees a dirty wall, sees his competitor, who did not have time to get the bottle earlier and is now thinking whether to take it away, sees a policeman with a suspicious look. You live on one line of life, and he on the other. Your lifelines crossed at a point in the space of options, therefore this world, as a material realization, is one for both of you. All manifestations of material nature have an energetic basis. The energy field is primary, all other physical manifestations are secondary. Scientists are trying to combine different manifestations of energy into a unified field theory, and soon they will succeed. However, then again you will have to unite something, since the number of forms of manifestation of reality is infinite. We will not go into all these subtleties, and will consider energy as some kind of abstract force that is invisible, but, nevertheless, objectively exists. For our purposes, it is quite enough to accept the fact that the energy of a person's thoughts is quite material. The energy of thoughts does not revolve, is closed in the head of a person, but spreads into space and interacts with the surrounding energy field. Few people will dispute this fact now. Life circumstances are formed not only by specific actions, but also by the nature of a person's thoughts. If you are hostile to the world, it will respond in kind to you. If you constantly express your dissatisfaction, there will be more and more reasons for this. If negativism prevails in your attitude to reality, then the world will turn its worst side to you. Conversely, a positive attitude will naturally change your life for the better. A person gets what he chooses. This is the reality, whether you like it or not. As long as your thoughts are more or less uniform in direction, you are on the same line of life.
As soon as the attitude towards reality changes in one direction or another, the parameters of mental radiation acquire new characteristics, and the material realization of the layer of your world passes to another line.
There, events unfold according to a different scenario, in accordance with the parameters of your radiation. If the scenario doesn't suit you, you will struggle to make a difference. When faced with obstacles, you react negatively, expressing dissatisfaction, or becoming discouraged. Your mental radiation is rebuilt on a line, where the obstacles become even greater. As a result, it turns out that life is rolling somewhere along an inclined plane. This process seems unmanageable, but in fact it is you, with your thoughts, that direct your implementation to the problem areas of the space of options. You believe that your actions are overcoming obstacles. But in fact, it turns out that you get what you choose. You choose to deal with obstacles, and you get them in abundance. You are absorbed in thoughts of problems, and they are always present in your life. Your actions are aimed at changing the situation on the current line of life. But the point is, you cannot change the script in the variation space. You can only choose another. When you try to change what you don't like in the script, you think about what you don't like. Thus, your choice is successfully implemented, and you get what you don't want. On this line of life, you cannot change anything. Likewise, while in a museum, you cannot remove or rebuild an exhibition that does not suit you. You are not the master here. But no one forbids you to turn around and go to another room in order to look at what you like best. Of course, the transition to the lifeline where you have what you want does not happen simply by desire. Not all thoughts are subject to realization, and not all desires are fulfilled. And the point here is not in the content of thoughts, but in their quality. Just a dream or a desire is not a choice. Dreams don't come true. Certain conditions must be met that you will learn about. In the space of options, there is an infinite number of lines of fate for each person. We have no reason to be offended by our fate, because we have been given the right to choose. Our only problem is that we do not know how to do it. The world manifests itself in all its diversity, as if it was created in order to please every taste. Everyone can find in this world whatever their heart desires. Even in different directions of knowledge, the world turns to us with the side that we want to see. For example, idealism claims that the world is an illusion and the world agrees. Materialism asserts the opposite, and the world again has nothing against it. People quarrel among themselves, imposing their attitude to the world to each other, and the world shows that they are all right. Isn't that wonderful? The space of options is the so-called illusion, and the material realization is what is meant by the material world. We always get what we choose. Anyone who is familiar with the principles of the Islamic religion knows what the words, "the fate of a person is captured in the book," mean. It means that fate is predetermined and you can't get away from it. Similar statements are found in other religions. Indeed, the destiny of a person is already predetermined. The mistake of religions lies only in the fact that the variant of this fate is not one, but an infinite number. You can't escape fate.
And this is true to some extent, because you cannot change the scenario of a variant.
Fighting with the world around you to change your destiny is a very difficult and thankless task. There is no need to fight, you can just choose the option you like. Of course, all this is very unusual and raises reasonable doubts. But I didn't expect you to readily accept the model of options. After all, I myself did not believe until I was convinced that transurfing works, and flawlessly. It makes no sense to give preference to this or that model, only in order to achieve some kind of absolute truth. It is not the model itself that matters, but the practical result that it allows to obtain. Different mathematical models can represent the same physical phenomenon in different ways.
Wouldn't it be funny if experts in analytical geometry suddenly took up arms against mathematical analysis and began to prove that geometry is the only true mathematical discipline?
Mathematicians were able to agree among themselves, but philosophers and religious leaders were not. Where is it, the space of options? This question is very difficult to answer. From the point of view of our three-dimensional perception, we can say about it that it is everywhere and nowhere.
Imagine an endless plane, without beginning or end, in which two-dimensional men live.
They are unaware that there is a third dimension. It seems to them that the plane is the only world, and they cannot understand how it can be something else outside of it. But, nevertheless, we know that it is worth adding a third dimension to this model, and an infinite number of such planes can be created. So do not be disturbed by the fact that we are not able to visualize how an infinite number of parallel worlds can exist along with our world. It is difficult to believe in the reality of the existence of parallel worlds. But on the other hand, is it easy for you to believe in the theory of relativity, according to which, with an increase in the speed of a body, its Massachusetts increases, its size decreases, and time slows down? It is not yet possible to verify this from personal experience. The important thing is not whether we understand it or not, but what practical benefit we can derive from it.
In the face of infinity, arguing about the advantages of a particular model is simply ridiculous and petty.
Imagine infinity in the direction of increasing distances.
There, in the distance, there is no end. The infinity towards decreasing distances, oddly enough, also has no end.
We can only observe a limited portion of the visible universe. Both the telescope and the microscope have their limits. Infinity in the direction of the microcosm is no different from the infinity of the macrocosm. There is a hypothesis that the universe we see occurred as a result of the Big Bang. Since then, it has allegedly been continuously expanding. Bodies move in space at a tremendous speed. But on the other hand, taking into account the huge distances, it seems to us that the expansion of the universe is taking place for a very long time and slowly. It is also known that in a vacuum, at every moment of time, elementary particles are born out of nowhere and immediately disappear. Given the relativity of space and time, nothing prevents us from considering each such particle as a separate universe, similar to ours. After all, we do not know the structure of elementary particles. For physicists, they appear sometimes in the form of waves, sometimes in the form of particles. Moving further and further into the microcosm, the relative distances become just as huge, and time for the inner observer slows down again. For an external observer, our universe exists for one moment, like a particle born and extinguished in a void, and for us, as internal observers, the universe lives for billions of years. When you take a sip of coffee, think, how many universes have you swallowed? Infinite, because infinity is not divisible. To fly inside the microcosm is as far and long as it is to the boundless expanses of outer space. Time, like space, is infinite both forward and backward. Segments of time can be both infinitely small and infinitely large. Any point in a segment of time can be considered as a reference point, on both sides of which the infinity of time extends. Moving a reference point over a time span does not change anything in front or behind. All this infinity of nested worlds exists simultaneously. The center of the universe is located simultaneously at each point, because the same infinity surrounds any point from any side.
And all events exist simultaneously for the same reason that the center of the universe is located at any point at the same time.
It's hard to imagine. But it is also impossible to grasp infinity with one glance. No matter how much you move mentally across the universe, the same infinity extends further. There are even more confusing theories, according to which, our visible universe turns into a finite sphere in four-dimensional space. But this does not make it easier, because theoretically, again, there can be an infinite number of dimensions. Unable to imagine all this, we are forced to be content with our narrow horizons and pretend that we understand something. In modern science in general, there are many incomprehensible and inexplicable, however, this does not prevent us from using its fruits. Using the principles of transurfing, you will get stunning results. Let's just agree right away not to torment ourselves with questions about why and how it works. With the same success, a child may ask a physicist, why do bodies attract each other? The scientist will answer, because the law of gravity is at work. This will be followed by a new question: why does the law of gravity work? Still, why do bodies attract? No answer. So let's leave this thankless task, explain something, and just use the results of the model of options. We are not given to know and understand everything. It follows from the model of options that a person creates his own destiny. And nevertheless, the concept of fate in transurfing differs from the generally known ones. What is the difference? The fact that you can choose your own happiness, and not fight for it. Don't be in a hurry to immediately accept or reject the model of variations. Just ask yourself a question: how much have you achieved in the fight against the world for your happiness? Everyone decides for himself whether to continue his struggle in the same spirit, or still try a different way. After all, you can spend your whole life on the struggle, but you will not achieve anything.
Isn't it easier to make the world go to meet you?
After all, he only does what he realizes your choice. The selected order is always and unconditionally executed. But choice is not a desire, but something else that you have to learn about. Desires come true only in fairy tales. It is not for nothing that the conviction has taken root that it is either very difficult or impossible to fulfill desires. We have taken only the first step towards solving the riddle of the overseer. Soon you will find out why desires do not come true and dreams do not come true. Summary. Reality has an infinite variety of forms of manifestation. The multivariance of the world is its first fundamental property. Any model represents only a separate aspect of the manifestation of reality. Any branch of knowledge is based on the chosen aspect of the manifestation of reality. Your choice will always come true. What you choose is what you get. The space of options is a field of information about what was, is and will be. The information field contains potential variants of any event. The version consists of a script and scenery. The space can be divided into sectors, each of which has its own version. The greater the distance between the sectors, the greater the difference in options.
Sectors with approximately homogeneous parameters are lined up in the lifeline.
Material realization moves in space as an energy potential. The emission of mental energy induces the material realization of the variant. Each organism contributes to the formation of material realization. When the radiation parameters change, a transition to another line occurs. You cannot change the scenario, but you can choose a different one. There is no need to fight for happiness, you can just choose the option you like.